Welcome to the first Service Mesh Academy of 2026.
Oh, wow.
That's fascinating and kind of cool. I'm Flynn. I'm a tech evangelist for Buoyant. I am not running Service Mesh Academy today. That would be Phil. Phil, you want to introduce yourself?
My name's Phil Henderson. I'm a customer success engineer here at Buoyant. I get the fun job of seeing hundreds of production deployments of Linkerd and advising prospects and customers on how they should be doing it correctly in their production environments. So,
But I'm sure they're all doing it correctly before even talking to you.
there's times where we run into ones and we have to kind of reel back their enthusiasm and be like, hey, there's a better, more proper way of doing this when we're talking about, going to prod.
Yeah. I like to
but
tell
that's,
people that I have the job of figuring out how things actually work and then teaching them to people. And Phil has the much more difficult job of helping people actually do the right thing. So
I don't know. I won't call it difficult. I love it. So it's like,
that's good.
sometimes I love the ones where it's like, wow, you're doing this perfect. I don't even need to do this call with you. But then we have others. It's like, hey, let's go through this. Let's see how you're doing it, and work towards a better future. Because
Yeah.
there's always a better way of doing stuff. So that's what kind of really sparked this SMA. And it's actually my inaugural SMA that I'm hosting. So I'm excited about that.
This is actually the first SMA in quite some time that's not hosted by me. So I'm kind of psyched about that. It's always nice to have new people come in, spread the joy around a little bit. Maybe people are sick of watching me. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
fun quick fact, I started watching SMAs years ago. My first live one I watched was in December 15th, 2022, a deep dive into K8's MTLS with Linkerd. So
wow.
it's kind of really come full circle here where it's like,
Yeah.
well, 3 years later, here I am hosting one and now advising people on how they should be doing production with Linkerd. So I'm ready to dive in if you are, Flynn.
Yeah. So, bit of housekeeping. The workshops channel on the Linkerd community Slack is the best way to go ahead and ask questions, heckle, whatever. I will be keeping an eye on that while Phil is talking. And let's see. In February, we will be talking about running Linkerd on Amazon EKS. Also looking forward to that one. That should be kind of cool. But today we are talking about Linkerd and production readiness. And Phil is going to walk us through how you want to set your world up if you are supporting people at all. And that's actually probably a pretty good segue over into one of the things that Phil mentioned to me early on was that production is kind of a broader thing than a lot of people think it is.
Yeah, I have a very clear definition of production in my mind. So, and again, when I do this call with customers, I call it like production readiness call. So this is, a guide to Linkerd production readiness. And let me click next. When I talk about production, and Flynn, this is what we talked about the other day, is production is any environment you are having to support for developers or even your customers. People who are trying to
developers are customers, right?
Correct. Yeah, they
internal.
As a platform operator, your developers are your customers. If you're not giving them the things to succeed in their job, you're not doing your job properly, because they're the ones who are solving the problems for the business and trying to get that code to production to bring in the revenue or achieve whatever goal your company is trying to do. So on the agenda today, we're going to discuss what production readiness means for Linkerd. We're going to talk about core operational reliability and get into some important piece that I think at times people brush off in what I've seen and witnessed with work experiences, that important part of observability and alerting, whether using Buoyant Cloud, Datadog, the Grafana stack. There's so many, Splunk, there's so many things out there where you should be using to have eyes on what's going on in production.
You're making me feel guilty. I'm looking over at my little Pi clusters and going, yeah, I don't actually have any observability set up on them.
It's not too bad to have things shipped to a central cluster. That's how I kind of do mine, and we can get into that when I start
Get into that, yeah.
into the demo. So real quick, what I always like to do and remind people of, what does Linkerd do, right? At its core, will always bring security, reliability, and a way to see that the observability piece, the part I just said that sometimes we don't always give the respect of, and there's this in this order, no exception, right? These are the things we want to always think about in any environment. You want to be able to secure it, have reliable applications, and a way to see it, and not have that whole "trust me, bro," stance. So production readiness for Linkerd. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we want to be able to have our Linkerd deployments running under stable conditions, under normal clustered things, as well as failures. So when things are going wrong, you still need to make sure your important components are still up and running. Taking a secure by default posture with certificates, identities, and policies. And Flynn, I know we've talked about that's probably something we'll get deeper into, maybe a future SMA on policies,
Yeah.
relationship with applications. We both have very strong opinions on it.
There are a lot of things where the distinction between encrypting data in transit and actually paying attention to proper authorization policy is very, very, those are two very, very different things.
Yeah, and we talk about
yeah.
zero trust a lot here, at Buoyant with Linkerd.
Yeah.
And again, I think we could do easily a whole SMA on that, and people can hear me talk and drone on about that, because I get a little almost preachy about it even with our customers. So I know it's probably on the docket in the future, so stay tuned.
I'm making sure it's added to the
long list. Yeah, and again, with all that, having operational visibility, when things are happening, you have to be able to see what's going on, having alerting, your metrics, your logs. It's all well and good when things are running fine, but how often are we going to these areas and looking when everything's healthy? We have other things to be doing during the day. We're not staring at dashboards or logs all day. It's mostly when someone's coming to us and say, hey, I'm having a problem, I need help. And then really being prepared for those day two operations of upgrade, scaling, and the maintenance of Linkerd in production. Having a solid way of installing it, and it goes back to that upgrade. One of the things I think in the description of this SMA was, hey, are you going to be using Helm, the command line? A little bit future, we're going to talk about how the command line is not meant for production installations.
I'll actually bring that bit of the future to right now. If you're setting up Linkerd for a production environment, don't use the command line.
No.
You can make it work. There are people who do make it work with great success. It can be done. It's so much harder than doing it other ways. And
my
let's just make that the guideline. Don't use the command line.
As I've been now using Kubernetes for probably 9+ years. From day, and shortly after that was Helm, right? My first reaction when I go to throw anything into a cluster testing is I'm going to find its Helm install commands. I can do Helm install, I can do Helm template. I've never once gone and honestly found the CLI of a tool. Even Linkerd back 3 years ago when I was following along in that SMA I mentioned, I was looking for the Helm commands to do the same thing, just because that was my first reaction of having to, maintain anything, even in a test environment.
I am not going to lie. I still tend to use Linkerd install a lot, but I tend to use Linkerd install a lot when I'm setting up test clusters to go and play with things really quickly, because, it's just,
it's great for demos.
If all you want is a K3D cluster running on your laptop and you want to get it running right now, then Linkerd install gives you a nice path to that. But it's not the path from that to, I want to have this, I want to take this cluster that I set up as a demo, and then I want to run it in real world production. That's a tricky path to navigate. Phil and I have have gone over what it takes to actually do that, and it is simpler to just set it up with Helm in the first place.
Yeah. And when we
Like
get
substantially
into,
simpler.
yeah, and as we get into the core operational reliability of this, we're not going to even just talk about like how we're using Helm to do this, but it's going to be even more uh, zero point, and we're going to be talking about Flex and Argo here shortly. But when we're talking about core operational reliability, we're talking about what does that take to operate Linkerd reliably in production. That takes having your certificate rotations down, high availability, proxy tuning and resource configuration, and production grade installation. So let's dig into those. With certificate rotation, you're always going to want to have it automated or have a clearly documented process for rotating your control plane certificates before they expire, whether that be the trust anchor or issuer. We have great documentation on how to set that up with Cert Manager. When I go into conversations with prospects and customers, I am telling them day one, we need to implement it with Cert Manager. As of today, that's the way we're advising it. You know, as the world keeps changing constantly in our Kubernetes world, it may change in the future. But as of today, this is how I am advising customers to have it. But with that said, we do have plenty who have their own pipelines of a more of a manual process to do that, which is fine. I like to take any type of human error out of something. So if I can automate it, I'm going to do that.
I know we have people who are not using Cert Manager, but are using GitOps for secrets as well, which is a little interesting, and it'll be fun to talk to some more of those folks later. But I would have to agree with Phil on this one. We've seen people burn themselves by trying to handle certificates manually and getting it wrong. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we talk about in some of these calls of like, you know, we have customers like, hey, should I have a long trust anchor, short trust anchor, long issuer, short issuer? My first question really back to them is like, what is your security team like advising you to do? Like, we need to meet those goals first, and then kind of go from there. We have some who are very aggressive on like rotating stuff, which is fine. But again, you need to have that automated or clearly documented and kind of know what to do when that goes wrong, if it goes wrong, you know. So that is like baseline day one, have your certificate set up. You can't even install Linkerd without passing it some certificates. And that's another reason why Flynn and I just said you can't use the command line install for installing Linkerd in production. It has a generic self-signed certificate that I'm not even sure where it comes from. So it's meant for demo purposes only. But again,
it comes from the
Helm is just as
Linkerd.
easy.
Sorry, it comes from the Linkerd CLI itself. It just generates a random key and then generates a cert from that. And then it throws away the key for the trust anchor after it puts it onto the cluster, after it puts the public half onto the cluster. So as a practical matter, if you install Linkerd using the command line and you let it generate certificates for you, the moment you want to do any rotation of anything, you have to start over from scratch, right? You have to regenerate a trust anchor, regenerate the identity issuer, go through the whole thing. And it is possible, but it's way more difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah. And honestly, I think we have a link to Flynn, if you want to throw it up, the Linkerd automating control plane rotation certificates. I can't remember the exact link, but it is, once you have Linkerd installed with Helm, I think that page is copy pasting something up with Linkerd. Like, it is as simple as it can be, in my opinion. So it's one worth trying out. And spoiler alert, when you go to our repo for this demo that we have coming up, I'm using Helm and all that stuff. So it's not using the command line. I'm using Cert Manager to have a self-signed one and handle that still in that cluster. So another thing we talk about is making sure things are in high availability. Our high availability settings are pretty basic, right? Making sure there's at least 3 replicas, making sure they're on unique nodes, having the basic pod disruption budgets, pod anti-affinity, resource guarantees, so they have at least some guarantee to make sure that at least the things they need are there, right? You don't ever want to just have something with no resource request or limits. It's kind of playing a little bit with fire. With that said, you need to have eyes on your control plane and making sure you're not reaching those limits and scale them as needed when your environment grows. And then things that like help with updates, making sure, one pod comes up healthy before, basic high availability settings, or what I would consider basic high availability settings for microservices in our current day. And this is why you should be even developing your own microservices. I always tell people, in previous orgs where it's like, hey, you should always be running at least more than one replica, just so you know that, hey, my application has two and not causing any conflicts. I came from a large Java shop, and in dev, they would, have a bad habit of just running one replica, which was fine. It always worked. When they started scaling, though, handling things like database connections became tricky. They didn't account for that. That's why it's like, hey, have more at least than one running, just to flush that things out. And again, in my opinion, actually, in my experience, at some point, opinions become experience. So you need to be at least having some basic things. So these concepts for even Linkerd in production can be applied to many things that you're running in a Kubernetes cluster.
I was messing with adding some features to the Faces demo just recently and realized partway through that I was about to run headlong into exactly what you talked about, where, oh crap, this is just not going to work if I start having multiple replicas of these things. So yeah, close to home.
Yeah, it's I've seen it, so it's like at this point, it's like I don't think it's opinion. It's more or less it's based on experience and fact. So another thing we talk about, with customers and prospects and Linkerd users who are going to production, even at KubeCon, is Linkerd is really good about working out of the box as a service mesh. From day one, once you have it set up correctly with Helm, your certificate rotations, it often doesn't need much tuning. Where I find people need tuning is when they're meshing the world, they're meshing databases, Kafka, they're getting into the really nitty gritty of wanting to be secure. And when you're doing that at times with these large workloads, some of it takes some tuning, right? You got to give your proxy maybe a little bit more memory to handle more connections. Because nowadays we're not just putting microservices into Kubernetes, we're putting whole VMs into Kubernetes, and people are still wanting to have these things secured by a service mesh. They may not just get this default little micro proxy that we know with our baseline settings. And the easy thing about Linkerd and our how we can tune our workloads is you can just do it by annotations. You can set things on the global level, and you can do it at a namespace level, and you get all the way down to the specific workload. And this link here is one that I always have to send people. I was like, you should have this bookmarked as one of your first pieces of our documentation is proxy configuration, because it can be from the global perspective or all the way down to a specific workload. And that comes down to even if you're needing to skip ports or opaque ports. We have scenarios where we have customers who are already doing like some MTLS within their actual application. So at times those things need to be opaque or just skipped on the R proxy side to allow their application to still be secure, but continue working with everything else. Any inputs on that one, Flynn, or comments?
It's always a little bit interesting to me to run across stuff like this, because this is the sort of thing that folks like me rarely run into. The stuff that I'm doing tends to be, I'll be setting up a cluster to demonstrate a concept or to illustrate how you might do policies or something along those lines. And the traffic that I see is low enough that, I don't really need to worry about these sorts of things. But we have absolutely seen cases out in the real world repeatedly where somebody who's running Linkerd at scale will find that they do need to pay attention to this kind of stuff. So it might not be a thing that if you're trying to set up in production, this might not be something that you need to touch instantly on day one. But there's a kind of an underlying thing here, which is that you might very well want to start out by, maybe you install Linkerd and then you start bringing in, maybe you don't mesh your entire application all at once. Maybe you bring in a couple of workloads, get them in the mesh, see how they perform, and then you sort of iterate so that you can see where some of these gotchas might hit you, if any of them are going to, and be aware of the fact that it is possible to go through and tune these sorts of things, and possible to be able to tune resource usage, because at scale, that really can be very important.
Yeah, and like you said, it's like these things don't really start happening until you see it at scale, and it's never really on every workload. I remember seeing a ticket coming in just this week where it was a high severity, but the customer's like, hey, 99% of my traffic is perfect, but we have this one small set that keeps having some 500 failures. Yeah. And we were able to fix that easily, quickly, just with the right tuning. So again, Linkerd does a great job at catching, again, here's a good case, 99% of things. And then that 1% just needs that fine tuning. So that's why it's so important to like, just be aware of this, right? And again, this is where I have to just educate our customers on, hey, this is something you have to keep an eye on. That's a little, spoiler into our last section that we're.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of these tie into the observability piece or the security piece, or right. So we present these as separate topics, but they're all interrelated.
Correct.
Another one that we probably should have mentioned back on the tuning bit is that it's another thing where you might running across the protocol declaration thing, right? Where one of the things that we see at truly massive scale is we'll see cases where Linkerd protocol detection can actually fail because the pod in question is so slammed that it doesn't have the CPU to do it quickly enough. And okay, on the one hand, we have a way to fix that now, which is great. But on the other hand, that very much ties into the observability piece, where there are things that the observability chunk can show you to help you diagnose that.
Yeah. And I won't get into that much yet. I don't want to spoil everyone, but yeah. And I was going to bring up
let me interrupt you one more time, because we have a question.
Oh, good.
Beza, who is one of the Linkerd ambassadors, paraphrasing, if you're talking about the Linkerd control plane, do you want to see things scale horizontally or vertically?
Ooh, man, that's always that's an
I have an opinion
here question.
For the record,
but certain pieces scale better vertically, and this is where we get into more of I was going to bring it up more into observation.
We're talking about the control plane specifically.
Correct.
And my experience with the control plane is that it is happier to scale vertically than horizontally.
Yes, in most cases. There are some of our edge cases and customers where we scale them more horizontally, but those are more based because of how many connections they have. And even then, here's the spiel I give everyone, and I was going to do it closer to the end. Every component, a part of the Linkerd control plane is important. There's 4 main components of our enterprise one, and I'll show it in the demo. But one of the most important pieces is the Linkerd destination deployment. I describe it to people at a 20,000 foot view as like the brain of the proxies. It is responsible of getting all the information from Kube API, service IPs, pod IPs, all that information, and delivering it to the proxy so they know how to route things correctly. So again, we want to treat all the control plane parts with respect, but that's the one to, as we get into observability, you want to keep an eye on everything, close eye on that one too. But this goes right into like the production grade installation, right? We talked about how we do not install Linkerd with the CLI in production. We want to have more of a documented, repeatable, supported GitOps workflow. And at the end of the day, we were talking about Helm, but things like Argo CD Flux, I have customers using Terraform that's just using Helm under the hood. I have customers using Helm.
Argo and Flux, people mostly set them up to use Helm under the hood too, right?
Correct. It is
Yeah.
mostly powered by Helm, or you could do some other stuff
Yeah,
where
you can do
you
it
can.
differently, but yeah, I
Yeah,
usually see people do that with Helm.
I have one customer. They use Argo. They don't have everything to define. Like you can define Helm, the chart, the location, the install, the all the values. What they do is use Helm template on their side, generate all the YAMLs, and put it in a Git repo so they can track those actual diffs specifically. So there's numerous ways you can like leverage things with these tools. But at the end of the day, most people are still using Helm to get those manifests ready
Yeah.
in some way or the other on the cluster. So
And
so as go ahead.
there are things I definitely do not like about Helm, but on the whole, it's very effective for stuff like this.
Yeah, again, it's like I've been using Helm since for 9 years it feels like now, if not longer, and it's always been the command line tool I use to install stuff because I can also uninstall stuff cleanly from my cluster. Because I've had production like clusters I've always reused, so getting things out of a cluster cleanly is very important. But so that's the first part of having a production grade installation, right? Having that, even if you have something like just using Helm commands directly, and even I don't really believe that's great for production because now you're still having a human involved to actually type out commands, but having that documented and having good rollback strategies. I know we have a lot of customers who have more of a fail forward mentality, which is great. But it's also, as we say here, good to flex those muscles on those rollback, upgrade, rotating certificates. If you don't flex those muscles and get used to that, or stub your toe, when it does happen in production, you're gonna be deer in the headlights, right? You're gonna be shocked. You're gonna have your boss's boss on a bridge going like, why is production down? That's why it's good to like fail early in dev environments.
That's a thing that I'm glad you mentioned that. I feel like we really should have put this on the slides. Any process related to your production installations, if you don't practice it, it's not a real process. Right? What I have seen repeatedly over time is somebody will go through and they'll say, "Oh yeah, we've got this certificate rotation process. It's great." And then something happens
And it's not
and
great.
either there's an outage because the certificate expired, or they realize that there's potential compromise, and so now you have to run this process and you have to do it quickly because it's time critical at this point. There are consequences to not being able to do it quickly. You need to do it now, and you find out that if you haven't done it regularly outside of the stressful environment, you're not going to be able to do it when you're under stress. I would love to be able to count the number of times I've seen that. I've seen it so often.
I've seen
So,
it in disaster recovery environments where people are like, yeah, we have a DR environment, and then something happens
yeah.
to your prod environment. Like, all right, let's go bring up the DR environment.
Okay,
Like,
let's switch to the DR, and
this
nothing
isn't
works.
configured. No, it's not even configured like at all. It's like that's the worst feeling. You're like, oh wow, no one's ever kept up with this. This is like 3 versions behind. We're trying to bring up this cold stack. You don't want to be in those scenarios, right? So in the beginning, we talked about production environments and what that means. We're talking about even development environments, folks, right? Like, so if you're not practicing these things in development environments and having that, what I call environment parity, it's hard to predict things that are going to go wrong in production, right? So if you do everything the same from your prod, sit, QA, all the way to DR, then prod, then you're flexing those muscles, right? You can do that even in dev. Say, hey, we're gonna take an outage. We're gonna like try this out, see how it goes. If you have that parity, it's easier to do that in a not the actual production. Again, we're treating them all like production because your developers are your customers. But it's different when you have many different department bosses on a call going like, why is live down?
Yeah. There's also, people will often come back and say things like, "Oh, but you can't really make dev mirror production because it doesn't get the traffic and, it's running different versions or whatever." That's true, but you can absolutely have the infrastructure for development set up effectively the same as production, and you can 100% do the same processes for like a development upgrade that you'll later do for staging upgrades or production upgrades.
You can run
Certificate
more than one
rotation.
pod.
Yeah,
Make
certificate
sure things are
rotations. You
working.
can absolutely have that work exactly the same way in development as you do in production. And the closer you can get to, you don't, what we're talking about here is less you have to have your application be the same between development and production. What we're talking about is you need to have your infrastructure and your processes be the same between development and production. And
Right.
that's the really critical bit.
It's so hard to get lower environments, as we'll call it. I don't even, call them development, but we'll call them lower environments that are still, as important as production. It's going to be hard to get that amount of data and traffic unless you're bombarding it with even performance tests. And performance tests can be expensive, right?
Well,
Because you're
we're not even going to talk about performance testing. Oh my God.
finding the right performance tool to be able to like even simulate real data is hard. Because again, a lot of times you don't even have maybe the databases behind it for,
Yeah.
the customer data to go through all this stuff. So, but again,
Yeah.
it's not a good excuse to not try to meet as much possible getting that environment parity. So as long as you start doing something different, you lose all your predicticality for production. So a little preachy there, but I've been on too many outage bridges in the middle of the night going like, why, having to answer to bosses about why are things down, and getting people to calm down and like just search for the actual problem so we can go back to bed.
We should point out that, of course, Phil has not ever had to talk to anybody about outages dealing with Linkerd. These are all from previous jobs. And
Yeah.
if you believe that, I have a lovely bridge to sell you.
Yeah. I don't mind hopping onto, big outage bridges and kind of like, sometimes you have to be the vendor comes in and calms everyone down, right? Like, hey, what have you guys done? What's the actual problem? Getting everyone to take a deep breath and like kind of rubber duck it, explain what's going on. A lot of times you can start ruling things out that, very quickly. So,
Yep.
So now that we talked about core operational reliability, we're going to talk about the last and maybe arguably one of the most important is observability and alerting. As we've been talking about, when things go wrong is when it's not fun, and being able to have eyes and even that alerting part of knowing before someone calls you that something's going wrong. You don't want to get woken up by your boss in the middle of the night saying, why is things down? And you're not answering your phone because you're sleeping.
The alerting part is actually really interesting. We have a bunch of people who talk and ask me questions about observability. Oh, how do I set up this dashboard? How do I see this? And I don't know if the world is different for you, Phil, but I almost never have people ask me about getting alerts before the humans start noticing.
Humans are always going to be the first ones to notice. And, I lived in a world for the longest time where I got alert fatigue because any wrong misconfigured alert starts just blasting people. And then people start putting those emails in folders, filters, and ignoring them. So having, meaningful, I have it right here, having actionable alerting instead of just spam, right? That's what it becomes. And that a lot of that comes first with metrics, right? You have to have the right metrics. Looking at, again, what Linkerd brings, those golden metrics, our success rates, our requests per second, our latencies. A big piece of this too that I have to make sure people are doing is logging. Where are you shipping your logs? Are you sending it to Datadog? Are you sending it to Splunk? Are you actually looking at your logs? It's sometimes I weep when I find customers who are sending everything to Datadog and then like don't use Datadog. It's such a great tool that I feel sad when people aren't using it correctly because an organization's paying good money to have that tool for you to be able to use. And I think at times it can be overwhelming because there's a lot to some of these tools, and we'll get even into that here during the demo of some of my favorite tools I use to make sure we can get issues solved quickly. So again, we're going to come back to that last bullet point here is having that operational awareness. Teams can quickly detect and diagnose stuff to anything mesh related.
Yeah.
And in mesh related, I don't know if I didn't like how I put that on there because often it's not mesh related. So again, one of the greatest things Linkerd does is bring this observability piece, right? So a lot of times there's been all issues within applications and no one knew it because they didn't open up, Schrodinger's box or whatever it is, right? They didn't know the cat was dead or alive because they just weren't looking, right? So at times when people enable Linkerd and have some observability into stuff, they go, my application is like crashing because of the mesh. It's like, no, I'm sorry, but it's more or less your application's been having problems, and we're just helping you resurf some timeouts or things. It's like you shouldn't have, if you're having a 10-second timeout on something, you should check your downstream system. It should be responding.
We pretty often see people where they will mesh an application and then immediately go, your mesh broke my application. And we look a little deeper and find, no, actually, your application is being broken the whole time. It's just that you didn't see it because your error reporting was so bad. And now
Yes.
Linkerd is surfacing some of these errors and making you aware of them.
I was hoping this wouldn't naturally come up, but one of the I think strongest points about Linkerd, and we even come back to that proxy configuration page where we can get annotations even on specific workloads. One of the strongest things it can do is you can unmesh it. You can unmesh your workloads, and not like have it completely disrupt stuff. But oftentimes where, I get pulled onto outage calls, I've been like, all right, you think it's a mesh, let's unmesh it. We have to get your application up. I'm not going to like pigeonhole you into having to use Linkerd if we think this is a problem. We need to get production up. It's the middle of the night. People want to go back to bed. Let's figure out if this is the problem. Let's unmesh it.
Of course, we also see situations where the application relies on Linkerd's gRPC load balancing, for example. And so when you unmesh it, the application doesn't run correctly.
Yes. So that's the other side of the coin. But there have been some where, we'll advise, hey, let's get you up. If we think it's this, let's unmesh it. And the problem still persists. It's like, all right, let's remesh and let's start really digging into what we're seeing, right? And why we're seeing it. And I feel that's just very powerful. And I do bring that up with our customers too during these calls of like, hey, the goal is always to have 100% uptime, whether it's, Linkerd's in the mix or not. That's our goal as IT professionals, is keeping our applications healthy. But again, it's often not the mesh. So I always hate to be the bearer of bad news, because now it's like, now we have to, okay, it's not Linkerd. Now we really have to find out what's going on.
I would go so far as to say that most of the times I have seen people suspect the mesh, it's not the mesh.
Yeah. I try to do from a famous movie, Robin Hood Men in Tights. There's a scene where the Prince of Rottingham's trying to tell, King John or whatever, or Prince John, hey, tell me the bad news in a good way. And that's how I try to deliver news to customers. Like, well, let me be enthusiastic about this. It's not the mesh, but you're still having problems in your production environment.
Yeah. But hey, we can use the mesh to figure out what the problems are. Isn't that great? I mean, it is great, but the customer might not see it that way.
Yeah.
I haven't thought about Men in Tights in a really long time. So
the great Richard Lewis. So
yeah.
RIP. Yeah, one of my favorite movies, so there's going to be a Mel Brooks documentary coming out soon, I think. So that's something to look forward to in 2026. I'm sure that movie will be mentioned. So
Mel Brooks, always politically correct.
Oh man, I adore Mel Brooks films. So I even have the whole he was a producer in it, but I have the whole old Get Smart TV show DVD collector's box. So it's not even Blu-ray, it's DVD. So but hey,
leaving Mel Brooks aside, though, as difficult as that is to do, now is a lovely time for anybody who has questions. Now is a great opportunity to drop them into the workshops channel. I'm also going to take this opportunity to point out things like hey, we have various courses that you can go take about Linkerd and learn things, and they're pretty cool. I am also going to take this opportunity to point out again that we have next month, we're going to be talking about running Linkerd on Amazon EKS. And I think we're going to dive into things like the AWS private CA and, some cool Amazon specific features there because people have asked questions about it. And with that, though, is anything that, I don't know, anything that you've suddenly remembered that you don't feel like we've covered before diving into the demo?
Last night when I was like going through this, rehearsing it, something popped in my mind. But I think probably during
And now
our
you've
whole
forgotten it?
conversing, I think we probably brought up, there was a couple of things that we didn't have in slides that we brought up.
Yeah.
So we covered everything I would consider as a good foundation of having Linkerd running in production. And I really don't think any of it's really that difficult to ask. A lot of it, again, when we're talking about production, we're talking about anyone you're being your customer, whether that's your developers or your actual production environment where you're serving business customers.
I would phrase it as, if you have people who aren't you who are relying on a cluster, it's in production. If it's just you, well, you should make that decision. But, maybe whether those other people are developers working on an application or customers externally to your organization or customers internal to your organization. So production is a broader thing than a lot of people often consider it.
And this kind of gives a good segue into, I'm going to go through the demo kind of what I have as a production environment. And this is a good segue of like, this is my production environment. I use it here at Buoyant for my job. Exhibit A, I'm using it today to showcase in an SMA. Some of the stuff I tried to do on my Mac last night, Macs are not built for production use of Linkerd and Kubernetes.
Yeah.
So I had to use one of my clusters. My clusters are Star Wars themed. So this one's named after Tatooine. So, sorry, big nerd. A little dated, running 133. I maintain mine by cluster API. So it's a lot harder to update them, or I just don't have the time. Sometimes I have kids. But, we have a, what is this? 8-node cluster, 3 control planes, 5 worker nodes. I've deployed the Cube Prometheus stack. So, and for those who don't know, this is a great project, and I'll have all the Helm install commands and values in the repo. Installs a Prometheus, a Loki, Tempo, as well as Alloy to collect everything. And we'll kind of dig into those when I bring up Grafana here. But a quick...
let me also point out, this, I believe you said, is not live yet, but it will be live shortly after we are done here, right?
Correct. I am, so over here, I have my Loki deployment fairly robust.
Actually,
cluster.
Before you go over that, you mentioned Alloy, Prometheus, Loki, Grafana, and I think there was another one. Why don't you run down what each of those pieces does?
Good idea. So Prometheus, most people are, familiar with Prometheus. It's where we're dumping most of our metrics nowadays. If you haven't heard of Prometheus,
it is a very popular time series database. Yeah.
Very popular. Most people's go-to. Maintaining your own is kind of a pain. So if you have the money, go do a managed Prometheus. And we'll even in the demo show you why sometimes it can be a pain. Grafana is all powered by Grafana. So Grafana is just a UI for all these pieces, right? If you're not familiar with Grafana, it's been around now for ages. It came even, I think, before the Kubernetes realm. I was using it on, I'm going to date myself a little bit with some of this cloud native stuff. I was using it on Mesosphere.
Prometheus and Grafana, if I recall, both predate Kubernetes.
Yeah, I think I had Prometheus on Mesosphere too, and that's where I learned like I do not like maintaining any type of like actual Prometheus for long-term stuff. So best to pay for it.
I'll actually jump ahead a little bit. The reason that Prometheus is something of a pain to manage is that it is very, very stateful. It has to, it's a database. It has to hang on to a bunch of data for you, and it needs to hang on to it for long periods of time, potentially. And anytime you're talking about maintaining state in a Kubernetes application, that is much more annoying than managing a stateless application.
Yes, you have to think of things like volumes. So even in this cluster, let me show you first my Linkerd deployment to show that proof's in the pudding. Like I do have my Linkerd installed in a high availability mode. I'm running 3 replicas of our control plane components. For this demo, I'm actually running our Buoyant enterprise for Linkerd because this is my production environment, and this is a this is the side of the house I work on, more of the enterprise side, and getting customers into more of a robust mindset with using Linkerd. So small little plug to our enterprise part there. As well as I have Cert Manager installed. So this is all still powered by Cert Manager. Cert Manager and Trust Manager. And here, for my trust anchor, I am not using a self-side. I'm using a self-side trust anchor, but in my environment, I have 4 clusters. And I do some federated services between them, and there's some things to be mindful when you're doing multi-cluster in production. And one of those, and this is the part, Flynn, that we missed in my slide deck. Now that I'm talking out loud, is when it comes to the trust anchor and multi-cluster. The clusters that you have that are needed to talk to each other with Linkerd have to share the same trust anchor.
We should candidly go back and revisit the multi-cluster setup thing, because if you want to get really technical about it, all of the clusters in a multi-cluster need to trust the trust anchors for all of the clusters in the multi-cluster. And the simplest way to do that is for them all to have the same trust anchor, but you don't have to do it that way.
That would be...
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious about that.
You can kind of do a federated trust anchor setup, which has a couple of advantages in a couple of places, but it's more complex.
The way I did it on these clusters, so I'm actually running in. Oh yeah, you see all my stack here. I told you it was a production-like cluster, right? So I'm actually running external secrets. So what I am doing is I actually have my trust anchor out in Bitwarden's secret store. And I'm pulling that trust anchor actually onto 4 separate clusters. And I'm still using Cert Manager to rotate my issuer automatically. So even here, I'm still using Cert Manager and automation to drive this. I have taken a lot of my own human intervention out of it because I'm a human and I can be unreliable, and I have other things to do besides worrying about certificates. So having the
I'm really curious. Let's put ourselves on the spot here for a minute. What happens if you run Linkerd X Trust Chain?
Oh no, I don't have it. I don't know if I should have gotten it. Let's see if this is my local one. Trust like this chain.
Yep. Oh, well, that's kind of fascinating. It says things are broken. We're going to have to go and debug that later, I think.
Yeah, that's a little future nugget to something Flynn's been working on. That this may not be your latest version. That's why I forgot to grab the latest build.
No, actually, what that's saying is that you've rotated your identity issuer and you haven't restarted your control plane. Does that ring any bells?
Maybe. I don't know if that's right. I feel like I have everything working. Well, you know what? This is why we have a good piece of observability. So now that we have even a layout of, the environment, and we're getting curious.
I just realized I interrupted you while you were talking about the different pieces because we got onto Cert Manager and things like that.
Oh, yes.
So Prometheus is the time series database. Grafana is a graphing UI built over Prometheus. Alloy is a tracing collector.
So Alloy is, I'm still learning about Alloy. I would love anyone to put in the workshop channel and be maybe more of an Alloy expert, but it does a lot. It's actually right now the one doing some of my scrapes for metrics. It's doing grabbing the logs for Loki, and shipping all those to Prometheus. At one point, I even configured Alloy as it was doing all that for my clusters on my actual production cluster Coruscant, where I have some home automation stuff. I had it scraping my Home Assistant and throwing into that Prometheus for metrics. So Alloy is Grafana's replacement for, I forgot what they call it, like their
Hotel.
Grafana metrics collector. They have a
Yeah.
legacy name for it, but Alloy is like the new kid on the block where it does everything, you know. And I'm still learning it. So even when we start going into the Grafana, and I'll show you where I have some of the things where I probably still have misconfigured in my setup. And
then I think
luckily,
go ahead.
go ahead. I was going to say, luckily, you know, I'll have this repeatable where people can get this up in an environment and nitpick it and show me how to do it maybe more properly, you know, if I have something wrong.
Yeah. And I think you said Loki was a log aggregator.
Yes, right. Loki is the log aggregator. So when we were talking earlier, I was surprised, you know, I kept mentioning Loki. And you're like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about with Loki. I'm like, oh, it's the log aggregator.
This tells you how often I set up production clusters with logging, right? I mean,
yeah.
you know.
See, to me, that's funny because I've always thought logging is like one of the most important things. And even I was telling you when I was setting this all up this week, I was doing kubectl log commands and realized, well, why am I doing that? I have Loki over here with all the logs. Yeah. Spoiler, we'll get into that soon.
And the last bit would be tempo.
Tempo is Grafana's trace collector. So it's the one that displays traces. And there's also, I don't have it right now in this cluster, but there's a Pyroscope that does profiling. And you know, that's more of a nitty gritty. And those are really the, I'll save this piece for the later in the demo, actually. That's a little spiel. But right now, since we're curious about these certificates, I'm going to switch over to
take a look at some observability.
I'm going to look at, I'm going to bring up, you know, again, a little selfishly, Buoyant Cloud. You know, this is Buoyant SaaS product that gives observability out of the box to Linkerd deployments.
And we should point out, we haven't said much about Linkerd open source versus Buoyant Enterprise for Linkerd. bcloud requires Buoyant Enterprise for Linkerd, and the fact that we can look at it tells you that we are in fact running this demo on Bell. But almost everything that we're doing in here will work on open source. This bit, not so much.
Right. You could, it's just my habit of, you know, I always work in our enterprise mind. So it's just my first habit of always installing it with Helm in enterprise. And plus, I also like this piece of having this observability because there's great things out there. Like, you know, again, I mentioned the Datadogs, the Splunks. And a lot of times those could be, there's so much there, right? So many dashboards you can create. They give you the Lego bricks to do whatever you want, which can be overwhelming at times. And when there are problems, you really want what I call the nuclear dashboard. When things are about to like erupt, you want that blinking red light going, you're in trouble, go do this. And that's really what, you know, observability brings to the board, right? Having good dashboards, eyes on what's going on. And here we take more of an opinionated approach in Buoyant Cloud, where we, on our overview, and I won't go deep into this, I'm just going to go check the certificate, you know, question here in a second. But we get some of our golden metrics for the control plane. We get our success rates, requests per second, you know, what our resource usage is. It's saying 4 Linkerd deployments because I have my other Star Wars Planet clusters in here, but I only have Tatooine. Actually, let me get the correct cluster selected for our demo.
And if you ever see the control plane at less than 100%, that's weird.
Yeah, that would be, I've never seen one dip unless something's really like wrong.
Really broken.
And I really haven't seen Linkerd get into that such a state often. It's very rare. And there's usually some type of maybe human error involved. But one
I've seen it happen in cases where I deliberately broke the trust hierarchy to see what happened.
Oh, yes. Yeah, right. That will, you know, you restart the wrong things after breaking trust, you're going to see your success rate dip, if not a whole, you know, mesh meltdown, as we'll call it. But
one of the things, you're running 2.19.4. Nice.
Yes, latest. Again, I was installing things just with the, you know, Helm install, latest thing. Not the greatest habit. I should have had this Argo on this cluster, doing it right. But that's in my actual production cluster, and there's too much going on there for a live stream. There's actual errors going on there that I need to go like debug later.
Yeah.
But Tattooin's my one of my go-to for customer demos and stuff, or like today, a Service Mesh Academy. And one thing I really love about the Buoyant Cloud overview page is giving like, hey, how many things are meshed? How secure are you? What is your control plane version? What's your data plane versions, which is also important, right? There's times where you may need to run a different proxy version for a workload. We've had some weird edge cases where that's the where you have to, which can be controlled again by those annotations on the proxy configuration page.
And a much less weird case is maybe you're in the middle of upgrading Linkerd, and the way you do that is you upgrade the control plane first, and then you cycle your data planes so that they pick up the new stuff. And that's in that case, you will absolutely see different versions between the control plane and the data plane during that transition.
Right. And this is helpful when you forgot to do that one workload there. Like I thought I had everything up to date, and you can see and click right into it that it isn't. But another view
I've never done that, Phil. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm very forgetful, Flynn. I do things all the time. But another thing that's good about this is knowing that you're in HA mode right away. When I have to go through with customers, and if they're on Buoyant Cloud, I can kind of do and prep for their production readiness call within a matter of 15 minutes and make sure they're doing things correctly, which will tail into what we were just talking about and questioning, which was the certificate. So down here in our control plane view,
the basic summary here is that, this is a dashboard. There are other dashboard products out here. The big win of bCloud is that since it was created by the people who also created Linkerd, we get to put in a lot of intelligence about Linkerd itself. And so that can be really nice.
Right. And it's very opinionated because, when people are meshing their workloads, those are their important workloads. So we want to make sure they see the important stuff. We have a customer who is a heavy Datadog user. I would say they fall in the more the advanced Datadog user. They develop notebooks when things are wrong, and they know how to do the actual tools of that product, which is fantastic. But they love Buoyant Cloud. They come here first because it shows them the things they need to see right away. Is everything healthy? Is my control plane healthy? Are all my meshed workloads healthy? Because again, when we're meshing things, this is what we care about. So it's important not to get dashboard fatigue. And that'll tell here into when we start going to Grafana of how much there really is when it comes to metrics. But again, another thing I love about Buoyant Cloud, I get to see my certificate. So I get to see some information about my trust anchor here when it expires, and my issuer, which I have a short issuer on this cluster. So it's rotating every like 24 hours. So everything looks healthy, Flynn, because I know this has rotated since then, and my application's up. So we may have to mess around with trust a little bit later today.
Yeah, we're gonna come back to that a little bit later because we're gonna have to come back to that a little bit later because there's a particular thing that I see in the Xtrust output that makes me a little curious. But actually, well, you know what? Why don't you go through the rest of this, and then maybe at the end of your other stuff, we'll go back and we'll try
we have
something.
time for sure. We can poke around on the live so people get the context, and maybe it'll help someone in the future. And I'm not gonna go all the way into Buoyant Cloud. I could do a whole SMA presenting Buoyant Cloud and every feature with it. Everyone here at Buoyant knows that I'm kind of like the internal Buoyant Cloud champion and SME. So, but it brings these great statistics of, again, resources, again, our golden metrics, success rates, requests per seconds. We get to see all that in nice metric views. And I have a dip in something here. Oh, of course, it's Prometheus having some issues. We'll just ignore that for now. Hopefully when I go to my demo, everything's fine, so now we're going to go into the nitty gritty of really I wanted to show everyone is how important it is to having, again, this observability piece. And it was interesting. So, when KubeCon Atlanta was what, a few months ago, Flynn?
It was 2 months ago, which is just
Feels like forever.
yeah.
But Ivan and I did a talk, a beginners K8 workshop to Kubernetes and observability. And when we walked into the room, we thought we were in the wrong room because it was packed and standing room only. I was like, we turned around and tried to go out, and it's like, no, that's the right room number.
I've had
And one
that
of the
happen.
most,
It's kind of fun.
yeah, it was like, there was probably 1,000 people in there. But one of the most interesting things was it was half developers and half platform operators. And one of the challenges I kept hearing at KubeCon with people is like that gap that's really between developers and platform operators. And one of the developers who my demo didn't go well, and I started kind of having to like pick random people in the crowd and ask them questions until somebody like walked up to the mic. But one of the developers raised her hand and was asked like, "Hey, I've been developing microservices, putting them into Kubernetes. I've been asking my platform operators for some type of visibility into it, and they told me no. How would you handle that?" And I was like, pretty much like, "Hey, are they in the room now? Because they're going to have like a crowd, beating them." It's like, I found it flabbergasting that we're not giving everybody the tools they need to be successful. So again, when we were talking about production environments, your developers are your customers. You need to be treating them as such and making sure they have the tools to be successful. And a lot of that is just giving them observability. She was just asking for like logs and metrics. It's like that should be something you can give someone on day one in a cluster. Even if it's something as simple as Grafana, Loki right here. And again, I'll have all these Helm install commands in that repo. So by default, Grafana, this whole stack gives you some generic dashboards. We just showed you Buoyant Cloud where we had some very opinionated approaches on them. And with this default Grafana stack, it gives you so much. You can start digging into all kinds of metrics and views. And I always tell people you should use these as inspiration to make your nuclear dashboard, right? None of these are going to be perfect for what you need to see for your application. Even the Linkerd ones, I tell people like, hey, these are a good start, but you should still be taking them and making your own views of the things that you think are important. And again, we have some generic ones here of global success rates, requests per second, how many namespaces we're monitoring with Linkerd, how many are meshed here.
Do you have a link to that dashboard definition?
These are all the Linkerd ones.
Yeah.
Or they will be
like if I fire up Grafana and I want to go and add this dashboard to my own Grafana setup. Can't talk.
I have it all defined in the Helm's value. So these all get automatically populated with the Kube Prometheus stack. So you don't have to log in and import everything. And again, this will all be in that repo. And I have some work to do on the README so people can go through Demosh and show them the values and where those things are coming in. So I want to take time, make sure that's set up where people can. I don't want them to just run the setup script and have them set up and they're like, okay, what am I looking at? I just have everything here. Because like you were saying, like, hey, how do I go do this? Is cool, Phil. How do I go do this? It's like it doesn't take much effort. You just have to Helm install Grafana - this values file, and you're good.
So what I'm hearing is that I need to go and crack the whip on Phil as soon as we get off SMA. And
Yes. I think there's currently a line at Buoyant for that. I think Gary's the first one, which is fine.
Always is.
But so again, earlier we were talking as we were looking at the cluster architecture earlier and the monitoring namespace. We were covering those components of Prometheus giving our metrics, Loki giving us our logs, Tempo giving us our traces, and we don't have it installed, but Pyroscope would giving us our profiles for our applications. And even if you go to the metrics view, you start scrolling down, and there is just so much, right? There is observability for days. I think if we scroll down, out of everything that's being collected right now, we have over 1,600 different metrics we can start and go into develop dashboards on. Again, that can be overwhelming. You get the same thing in any one of these systems, whether it's Grafana, New Relic, Datadog, Splunk, whatever. It's all being put up there, and it's your responsibility to go make these nuclear dashboards. And that's why I think it's important to have things to get inspiration from, like these generic dashboards that we can install with Grafana, give you something to go off of. But the last thing you want to do in an outage in the middle of the night is have to flip between 8 different dashboards. You need one to go to know where's that blinking red light, what's about to explode here.
And that's going to be highly dependent on your application itself.
Right? Yes. But again, without Linkerd, you wouldn't have these metrics and these insights into it. So,
right. And setting up Linkerd's metrics also can involve some application specific stuff. For example, Linkerd cannot automatically know that a given thing is gRPC. You need to go through and do a little bit of work to get gRPC metrics. So setting up your dashboard, setting up that go-to dashboard may very well reveal things about Linkerd's config that you need to tweak. And that is itself a valuable thing about going through the exercise of setting up the dashboard so you can really understand what's going on.
Yeah. As I mentioned, we did that KubeCon talk. For the demo, what I really wanted to show was like a before Linkerd and after one. But that was so hard because without Linkerd, I literally get like very little metrics from my app. I get nothing, right? So it's like, how can I really I can just have a black screen of like, hi, I have nothing. Now with Linkerd, I'm starting to get these important metrics from my application that I didn't have before. So it would have made a really boring demo of a before and after. So people just had to imagine in their mind that it was just a blank screen.
Yeah.
So this covers metrics, and that's just, again, one piece of the view, right? So even with Buoyant Cloud, it's great, right? It shows you all these things, these metrics.
So speaking of application stuff, you're running the Faces demo in here. Do you have on this dashboard, do you have stuff about how well Faces is performing? I'm putting Phil on the spot again.
I do. I would have to go to my Linkerd dashboards because that's the only way I know how to get all that information. And we have one, again, could use it for inspiration, called this Linkerd deployment one, because right now Faces as a deployment. We have some rollout stuff in the future. That'll be maybe a little Easter egg for the future. But yeah, right now
you can go and tell it you want to see all the deployments, not just color, right?
Right. And again, these are some of our more legacy dashboards. I would use these and I would develop them to be a little bit more like, so I don't have to like have all these like different blocks. I would have one view. And again, this is where I tell people these are good inspirations. If I built all these for you, it would be, you would have to take it apart. We want to give you the Lego bricks to go build something great, right? So that's where I tell people how to use these dashboards. Of these are this isn't the final product. This is the Lego bricks. You now get to go build that cool Millennium Falcon or the new Pokemon Lego that's coming out. And yeah, we have Faces, working here. I have just a generic face install working, 100%. I don't have any default errors, just because I was prepping for another demo I have to do later today in my production environment. So right now it's happy as can be with our happy faces and cowboy hats.
I didn't realize there was a grinning face with a black cowboy hat emoji. So today I learned.
Well, spoiler alert. We've, as you know, have made updates to Faces where you can pass any Unicode emoji or symbol and it will show up there. So the possibilities now are endless, which makes it a little bit more fun for demos. I think so, at least.
Yeah, that should be showing up in the not too distant future in a proper release version of Faces coming to you.
Yes, and it's sparking some interesting SMA ideas I have, but I don't want to spoil the crowd too much. Anticipation's always great. There's some cool things I think we're doing with I'd even say it AI that I would like to maybe do an SMA on when we get a little bit more in the future on it. I know everyone's probably sick of hearing it, but it is the world we live in.
Yeah. So what else?
What else? So we're talking about metrics and dashboards, and that's really just again, like I was saying, one piece of this view. I often have to tell people, just as important as metrics are your logs. And that's where Loki comes in, or any log aggregator. I was spoiled early on in my career with Splunk before Cisco bought them, and it's a very expensive product, but it's fantastic for logging. And one of its strong points is you can make dashboards based off logs, and that's where I learned how important logs really can be. Metrics are important and great too. Like we just saw in numerous different dashboards how we can get our metrics and get success rates, requests per second, and all that nitty gritty detail. But at times, there's going to be logs going on that are maybe errors or warnings that aren't going to show up in metrics, but could be an underlying problem that you still need to fix. So this is where things like even Loki come into play, where you're shipping your log somewhere. In this setup, I have Alloy grabbing my Linkerd control plane logs. I have it grabbing the proxy logs for meshed workloads, because those can be important, as well as I have it grabbing the actual workload logs of some of these things we have running in this cluster. And, you may be saying or thinking, Phil, logs are boring. I could just, comb through them all day. What I find important about things like Loki is this left-hand pan view where you see how many info or error or unknown logs. This shows that you can start even having graphs based off your logs. You can start getting insights to things you didn't have before. As we can see, it looks like my Prometheus is running well. We're getting a bunch of metrics. We're in Grafana. It's working. But if we go look at my logs, it is getting spammed with out of order sample from remote write. So this is where I was kind of like alluding to my Alloy setup's probably not optimal. I think there's even open GitHub issues on people facing the same issue of like, hey, Alloy runs as a daemon set. This daemon set's collecting the same logs and metrics and sending up to the same, Prometheus and log aggregator. Flynn, as well as I do, you send the same metric to the same Prometheus. It does not like that. It's spamming this log because of that.
Yeah.
But again, to me as an operator, I'm over here before I even looked at these logs. I'm like, wow, this is running great. I'm getting all my metrics. I was missing an important view. So I know there's still something wrong with my cluster that I need to investigate. And again, I can dig into these, but it can be kind of more boring. Again, all these will be in the repo where you can deploy it onto your own cluster. Most of it will probably be configured to live in memory and not based off a persistent volume, just because, not everybody may have that actual robust setup in their cluster. But all that's pretty configurable through Helm. Other than that, I think that's all I pretty much had for my demo, Flynn. They're, really showing how important this observability piece is when it comes to production deployments, right? Having eyes on all these things. And without Linkerd in these tools, you would not see this stuff.
So once again, then, that means that this is a lovely time to ask questions. But yeah, Phil, let's do this. Let's go back to your shell.
Yes.
As long as we're putting us all on the spot
with my next slide,
live debugging and things like that. So do a rollout restart of your Linkerd control plane. Actually, sorry, first run xtrust chain again, and let me tell you what I'm looking at here. Xtrust is an unofficial extension that it's possible to run, and in this case, we've just asked it to please show the trust hierarchy. So it first shows us the trust anchors, it then shows us the identity issuer, and then it pulls the workload certificate from the identity controller itself, just to try to show the third hop there in a kind of a real world sense. So we see that the trust anchor has a subject key that starts with 8883. If you look at the authority key identifier, AKI, for the identity issuer, you'll see the same thing go up a few lines.
This one and then this one.
That SKI and that AKI match. So our identity issuer is in fact signed by the trust anchor. But if you look at the AKI for the workload certificate, you do not see the subject key for the identity issuer. And that makes me feel that the identity controller didn't get rolled out after the identity issuer got changed. There are several reasons why things can still be running when that's the case. And so that's one of the reasons why that's interesting to me.
Yeah, and
so if you roll out restart everything in the control plane, and then do rollout status so we can make sure it's done. And we're kind of getting into debugging your certificate setup, which is honestly a different SMA, but I just decided to put Phil on the spot.
Well, yesterday I didn't redo this cluster, but I upgraded my Helm thing to have 3 replicas, because before I wasn't running in a production-like setup. I was not even following my own advice. It happens.
Yeah. I mean, we can't all be perfect all the time. And most of us have a tough time with any of that. Okay, so now try Linkerd extras chain again. And now you see no red horribleness and everything is good. So now run xtrust chain -- help, because there is a way to get it to look at a different workload instead of the identity controller, but I don't remember what it is. Okay, so it looks like we want -n faces.
Ooh, autocomplete.
And then we want to give it a faces pod.
Faces, it's not going to be happy, but go face GUI.
Any of them, yeah. And there again, we see that the AKI for the workload certificate is that old E012 thing. So now if you do a rollout restart of faces
working after that,
then good things.
I guess my trust anchor never changed.
And the reason it's working is that faces is still using a certificate signed by an identity issuer that was signed by your trust anchor. We can dig into that further if you are particularly interested, but it's simpler to just restart faces.
Yeah, I was just trying to make sure there was no failure. But, we're not really breaking trust with the anchor. So
yeah, as long as you didn't change the trust anchor, then you're going to be okay. The momentary purple thing there was we were getting to see what happened when the pod restarted. Clearly, Phil is not running the application in a high availability.
In fact, not.
Nope.
Ooh, shame on me.
Pod for everything.
I was just preaching about this. Shame on me.
So now repeat your xtrust chain command.
Ooh, I'm going to need a different pod name, obviously.
You will need a different pod name. Use -L.
-L right now.
-L. Oh man, faces.buoyant.io/component equals face, I think is what that's /component equals face. I think that's what that's called. That's the label selector version.
Thank you.
Yep. And now you see that the workload certificate is updated. So one of the points of the chain command is to explicitly follow that last link. So we get to see when proxies have a cached version of things that have not been updated.
That is nice. Today I learned too, the Linkerd CLI, which is not meant for production installs, is extensible, right? You can write extensions for it.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, for a blip second, you saw my my cluster struggle busing it changed SED leaders. That happens that should not happen in a live cluster. That is me running my home lab very hot.
Today I learned that is a thing that can happen. That's
the SED leader changing. Oh man, you want to really break a cluster, go dork around with some changing etcd's IP addresses before it updates each other. It will you have to do some real in on-prem environments, some real surgery. Hopefully you have reference to what that node's IP was at some point. Yeah.
What I'm hearing is, for the love of all that is holy, don't change the IP address of a node. That's what I'm hearing.
Not all of them at one time if they're running etcd. Yeah. So luckily here in SMAs, we just do Service Mesh Academies and not what would it be? We're not doing Etsy Mesh Academies or Etsy Academies here. So it would be
Yeah,
I would not want to do that.
We're definitely not going to do Etsy. We're not going to do Etsy Academy.
Oh, I got someone at my door.
All right. So, yeah, we have this QR code there. You can scan that and give us feedback on Service Mesh Academy. We will really appreciate that because it lets us know things that are good and things that are less good and all of that. So please, or, you can always just drop comments in the workshop.
Hey, who knows? Maybe you have an idea for a Service Mesh Academy or an SED Academy, or you want to.
We're not going to do SED Academy, but if you have ideas for Service Mesh Academy, that can be basically anything service mesh adjacent. Service adjacent.
And maybe you want to guest host. Maybe be like me, where you watch a live one and then get a host one. It's not as bad as it looks.
Well, you know what they say in the medical community.
What do they say?
Watch one, do one, teach one.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess I have now done those, so maybe I'm an expert now.
Yeah. Excellent.
Other than that, like I was saying, this is where I'll shamelessly plug. That's what I was using today, right? We're talking about production environments. What's better than getting, enterprise support and enterprise product? It's free to try today. Scan that QR code. It's my favorite version of Linkerd, but again, I'm probably heavily biased on that.
It's also worth pointing out that it's what Buoyant runs our own production infrastructure on. So
we're pointing out many people, a lot of household names are running
Linkerd. Household names are using it for their infrastructure.
I wish I could say some of the coolest ones, but
you don't have to. Just go to buoyant.io.
You can see the logos, or there's some cool things in the world that are powering our lives with Linkerd under the hood, and it's very exciting to know that. And I'll plug even this. So even the Service Mesh 101 courses, I know Flynn mentioned them earlier today. On every call I'm with prospects or customers, I always tell people there's no reason not to do these. We set up a free cluster for you. Yeah. It's a guided experience, and you get a certificate at the end that you can then share on LinkedIn for Cloud. And who doesn't love the extra likes in their life? So I know Flynn was plugging it earlier. I always tell people about it. There's really no reason not to if you're curious about running Linkerd. And there's a 101 as well as a production course where it even gets into certificate rotations. And I don't know if we get the Ollie Stack stuff into there, or was that something you were thinking about at one point?
That's something I'm thinking should be its own course.
So maybe in the future there'll be a third one.
Do Linkerd production and then do Linkerd observability. We haven't created that course yet, but it's on the list.
Oh, that would be a good one, because as we've been saying, it's very an important piece of everything here is observability.
Yep. And yeah, on the 12th, we've got running Linkerd on Amazon EKS, which we think Phil is hosting. So we're going to put Phil on the spot yet again, which will always be fun. And we hope to see you all there. So with that, last chance for any questions. We'll give everybody a minute or two, and then we'll call it. Nicely done.
Thank you for my inaugural SMA. I think it was the largest live inaugural event in human history. So I think that's the official words we're getting from everyone. So I can't believe it.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. All right. Well, with that, I guess that we can go ahead and call it. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining in. Thanks for all the folks who are watching, who will be watching later. We appreciate it. And we will see you all in February. Sounds good. Thanks much.